In this recording, I want to talk a little bit about tabs in Microsoft Word. Tabs is a topic that isn't covered very well in the book. They've got 4 or 5 pages. They do one very basic example, but I think tabs, at least in my own experience, are much more valuable and should be given a little more emphasis than they're given in the book. I want to talk about a little bit at first is some concepts of why we want to use tabs and then do some examples. The reason we want to use tabs is because aligning text using spaces almost never works. So what we're going to be doing here in this unit is creating a table of countries and their currency and the current exchange rate for that currency. So the first company I'm going to use, or country I'm going to use here, is Germany, and then I'll space over it a little bit and say they use the euro, and space over it a little bit more, and the current exchange rate is 7451. Afford to make this a little bigger. Okay. That's great. Next country, Canada. They have a dollar like we do. Now, what this looks like is that they're lining up pretty good. The dollar's exchange rate is 1.09185. Okay. And now Great Britain. They use pounds. And I'm using the space bar here to try to line these up, and you can already kind of see that this doesn't line up very good here. It's a little bit ragged. It doesn't look too bad in this case, but if we have a pretty long list of countries here, and we will before we're done, if we have a pretty long list of countries, that can start looking pretty wavy here, and you don't like that, and I don't like that. And the decimal places, they're not too far off here. If I come over here, the British pound exchange rate is 0.583. We'll just do that. And again, the decimal places look pretty good here, but not too bad, but not exactly aligned up. There's just a little bit of a bend here. And the reason for that is because of the proportionally spaced fonts. Every character in most of the fonts that you use in most Windows programs today, every character's width is only as wide as it needs to be. So the capital B here is quite wide, but the I is narrow. The 1 is narrow compared to the 9. They only take up as much space as they need. And because they only take up as much space as they need, there's no equal amount for every space. So when I put spaces in here, I'm just kind of hoping that things line up pretty good. Not the right way to do it. If you want more exact alignment, you should be using tabs. Now before I go on here, in the last recording I had a little bit of an issue trying to find the tabs that were in the headers and the footers to show that if I insert here, let me just demonstrate this real quick. If I insert a next page section break, now I have a second page, and in the last unit I demonstrated because it's a second section, I can now change that to landscape. And what I was looking to demonstrate in that recording was that the tabs can get messed up when you do that in the headers and footers. The document itself currently doesn't have any tabs. Get my insertion point here. There it is. Currently doesn't have any tabs. You don't see any here. Well, that's not exactly true. There are some tabs here. If I press the tab key, I do move over, and there are some tabs. We'll talk about that in a second. But the header, I have all kinds of issues here. My document's stuck. There we go. The header does have some tabs, and the mistake I made in the last unit is I forgot to double click in the header. Now you can always go into View, Header, and Footer. I think that's the way you do it. I don't usually do it this way. That's why I don't know. Insert, is it there? Yep, there's headers and footers. Okay, and I can drop this down to get to the header and do more headers. Edit the header. That's complicated. The easiest way to get to the header is simply in this wide open space up here, double click. And that opens the header, and now immediately notice that the header has tabs set. This is a center tab. We'll talk about the different kinds of tabs in just a second. Here's another center, or right tab, at the right margin. What this allows you to do is put some text here and then press tab. And then when I type, this is still centered on the page, and I can come over here and type the current date, and it's aligned with the right margin. tabs, one of the things that tabs allow you to do is have text that are aligned differently on the same line. I didn't use in the Home tab the left align, center align, and right align because this is for the entire paragraph, for the entire line. I want the left side to be left aligned, the center to be centered on that tab. Notice how my name is centered. Okay? And this one, the date, is aligned with the right margin. So it's right aligned. I want all three of those alignments in the same line. Only way to do that is with tabs, or as we'll talk about a little bit more here, with tables. Okay. But now if I move down to the second section, notice that the tabs are set in exactly the same place for this. But my page is landscape, so those tabs are not in the right spot. And that's what I was talking about in the last recording, that if you change the orientation, your header and footer tabs, there are also tabs in the footer, your header and footer tabs may not be in the right place. You'll need to move them. We'll come back and fix these in a little bit. Change my header. Notice the header is the same on every page because the same as previous set. That's something you learned about in Unit 3. If you want to have different tabs on different pages, there's a way to do that. One of the more common ways is to use sections as well. Okay, let's get back to tabs here. I'm going to go get out of my header by double-clicking in the document, Control Home. Now I'm back at the beginning. Still having trouble seeing my cursor initially. There we go. Okay. Let's talk about tabs and a little bit more about concepts. Couldn't I do the same thing with a table? By inserting a table with 3 rows, couldn't I set here the word, and if this was in the, I could put this in the header, of course, tab example, and in here, hit the center alignment and type Volker-Gall, and in here, do a right align and type the date. And it looks very, very similar. And if I then take the borders off of this table, right, those dotted lines you see are in my document in the table tab. I have, let's get to the table tab here, design, I have, maybe it's layout, I can never remember where they're hiding this thing. There it is, view the grid lines on. So they're not really there. And that looks very, very similar to the line above. Right? So the book gets into a conversation about, well, when do you use tabs and when do you use tables? Really doesn't matter, right? Depends on the document. You may get a document from somebody else that already has a table in it to align things. You may get a document from somebody who's got tabs in it so that you can align things. Right? Whatever's already in that document, you're going to want to redo it just so that you can get away from tabs or get into tables or whatever you want to, whichever one of those you prefer. But in general, when you're creating a brand new document, you can use tabs wherever you need to, or tables if you prefer, to help you line stuff up in multiple columns like this. As I go through the rest of this recording, I'll mention a few places where tables are a little handier. One of the first things is, remember, tables have styles, so you can format them a little bit nicer. It's easier to add columns. If I wanted to add another column in here, it's easier in tables, but it can be done in tabs. Tabs also have some of their benefits. We'll see them in a little bit. All right, now to tabs. I mentioned when I was going through the example that at least it looks like there are no tabs in this document. Okay? Tabs appear on the ruler. If your ruler is not visible, go to the View tab and show the ruler. I have it on all the time. I think you should too. It helps me visualize what's going on in my document. All right, so make sure your ruler's on, but there don't seem to be any tab marks here. Office 2013 is the first one that is the first version of Microsoft Word that does not show you the default tabs. In the older versions of Word, there were little tick marks underneath each half-inch mark here to designate, and they were under the ruler, not on the ruler, under it, to designate where the default tabs are. 2013, they took those out. So how can I prove that there's really tabs every half-inch? Well, first of all, I can press the tab key, and it jumps to the half-inch, to 1 inch, to 1.5, to 2. Right, so that seems to work. And just so you know, every time you press the tab key, only one character is inserted into your document. Those little arrows designate tabs. There's a space there for some reason. Okay, that's what the little dot represents. This dotted line from the last unit is the section break that I put in. can turn those off. If I want to backspace, I only have to backspace 4 times because there's only 4 characters there. Right? So remember, a tab is a single character. You can delete it like any other character. Those default tabs, we can also see them by going to the paragraph dialog box. So I'm going to show the dialog box using the little show dialog button and then select tabs. And that gets me into the tabs dialog box. And the tab dialog box shows me what tabs are currently set in this paragraph, none. And it shows me the default tabs of 1/2 inch, so that's where they're set. If for this document you want default tabs every 3/10 of an inch, every inch, you can change the default tabs, but that's pretty rare. I occasionally find that 5/10 of an inch is a bit much for me when I'm doing numbered lists, when I'm doing bulleted lists, and I will often in a document change the default tabs to 3/10 of an inch, but most people just leave those alone. Okay, so that's one way to get to the tabs dialog box. I'll show you a more convenient way here in just a second. All right, so that's where the default tabs come from. But what if you want to set your own tabs? All right, what I don't want to do, let's say I wanted to put something at 4 inches here. I don't want to type tab 8 times to get to the 4-inch tab if I have to create a lot of values in that 4-inch column. Instead of punching the tab key a bunch of times, I'm going to set a manual tab, and that's kind of my term, a manual tab to say I want a tab at 4 inches. Tab setting is pretty simple. The first thing you have to do though is use the tab selector. That's this little guy in the left margin, or to the left of the left margin. Okay? And notice if I touch it, it says left tab. The L you might think that stands for left. Maybe it does, but what I see is that there's a vertical bar here that's up and it's aligned on the left-hand side. If you click that, you can change the tab type. This is a center tab. Notice the vertical bar is now in the center, so that's a center tab, kind of like what we used in the header for my name. There's a right tab. The vertical bar is on the right side. This is a bar tab. I'm sorry, a decimal tab. A decimal tab has a decimal point, so that's what the little guy means there. Decimal tabs are used to line up numbers with decimal places. We'll do that in the example. And finally, this is the bar tab. It's really not for spacing characters. It's more graphical. What it does is it draws a vertical line at a certain spot, and I'll do a demonstration of that as well before we're done. Next thing, it shows you a way to get to this object. I normally just point to it over here and drag it. Same thing with that one, and then you're back around to the left again. If you click these in sequence, ultimately you'll come back. Okay, come back to the left. There is no way to go backwards. So if I click one, oops, I need a left tab. I can't do it without going all the way around. There's no way to make this go backwards in the sequence that I found. So I just keep clicking it and go. All right, well, let's do our first example here. Those are the concepts. We pick the type, and then to set a tab, we drag it onto the ruler. We don't drag it. You set the tab type, and then you simply click. So now I have a left tab at the 1-inch mark. Now before I start, I want to remove all the tabs again and just use my default tabs to show you why we'd want to set some custom tabs. And while I'm here, I'll mention that to remove a tab, the easy way to do it is to point to it, but you have to be careful to make sure that that tooltip that says left tab is showing up, because if you're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, you might miss and not get that tab. What I try to do is aim for that little vertical extender, that bar, and then that gives me this tooltip. Once you have the tooltip, you can simply drag this away from the ruler, and that deletes the tab. Okay, so let's build a table here. I call it a table. It's a table that's built with tabs versus a table that's built with tables. This is a Microsoft Word table. So this is an example where I could do either one. I could do tabs or I could do tables. However, I'm demonstrating tabs in this recording, so I'm going to use tabs. I want to create an exchange rate table. So the first thing I want in the left column is the name of the company, or country, excuse me. And then I'm going to press the tab key to go to the next column. And in this column, I'm going to put in the currency that they use. Germany uses the euro. I'm going to press the tab key and type in the current exchange, which is 0.7451. Looked these up this morning, so these are, depending on when you're listening to the recording, these might be a little bit dated, but they're current as of 8/4, not that it matters much. All right, now I'm going to start a new line. my next page section break is causing all kinds of trouble. So I'm going to turn my markers on. Okay, now my next page section break is on a new line. I think that's going to save me a little grief here. Put my cursor back up to the top, press enter. That's better. Okay, now the next country that I want to exchange money with is Canada. And if I press tab, I get a dollar. They use dollars. And if I press tab, lines up pretty good. A little crunched, but you get the idea. Next country I want to exchange with is Great Britain. Tab, they use pounds. Tab. And now it's really getting crunched. And then the Japanese yen. Notice when I press tab after Japan, it moves to 1/2. Why didn't it do that for any of these others? Because Germany, Canada, and Great Britain, the text is longer than that. When you press tab, it moves to the next set or default tab stop. So with Japan, I'm over here, their currency is the yen, and I press tab, and now things are really out of alignment. Okay. So now I have some problems, and this is why I would want to set tabs to make these line up. Plus, if I wanted a little more space in here, I'd have to add more tabs. And what I like to do when I'm using columns of text like this is only have to press the tab key once between each column. So I'm going to set some tabs to make that happen. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is that tabs are a paragraph level formatting. Now each one of these, I press the enter key after each line, so technically each one of these is a paragraph. So the tab formatting is applied to each paragraph individually. So if I add a tab to this line, I select that line or don't select it, just click in it and add a left tab. Notice left is still selected. And let's say I want to put it out here. Right. This paragraph changed, but the others did not. You can have different paragraphs for or different tab settings for every single paragraph. Well, in this case, I want all 4 of these paragraphs to have the same setting, so I must select them first. And now I want to set a tab. Okay. I think the first tab that I want to set, I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. The first tab I want to set is at 1/2 inch. Well, let's make it 1 inch. I want this entire table to be indented. So at the beginning of each line, I'm going to press tab, 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 tab. And notice they all jump to the 1 inch marker. What happened to my default tab at 1/2? How come these didn't jump to 1/2? Because I set a tab at 1, every default tab to the left of my manual set tab stop here is removed. So there are no default tabs here anymore. There's still a default tab at 1.5 because it's on the right. But any tabs to the left are automatically removed. Okay, so let's set another one for the currency out here, and then finally another one. Oops, forgot to select my paragraphs. Okay. And let's put it out here, okay. And then put this one out here. Looks like I did something wrong with Canada. Either, what did I do there? Let's turn on the markers and see what's hiding inside there. There are extra tabs here. And I pressed 2 of them. So if your columns don't align, turn on the special characters and see what's going on. And notice now my columns line up a little bit better. Okay. Definitely better. These are lined up nice and straight, and these are all on the left. But what if you don't want them aligned on the left? Left-aligned tabs are the most common, but they're not the only types of tabs that are available. Maybe I want my currency, and before I forget, let me add a new paragraph to the beginning of this. Right, and this will be my title, country, and this will be the currency, maybe, and this will be the exchange rate. Just to make those stand out a little bit more, maybe I should underline them. So I'm going to highlight them all and underline them. And this is one of the things that bugs me about tabs in Microsoft Word. When you press tab from here to here, any text formatting you have, like shading or underlining, is also included. I don't want that. So I'm going to undo that, double click this, and turn on underlining. double click this. I'm going to press the F4 key on my keyboard. I don't know if this has made it to any of my recordings. Definitely not in Microsoft Word. The F4 key in all Microsoft products says repeat the last thing that I just did. I turn to underlining on F4. Highlight this. F4. Right, so I have to do them separately if I don't want the tabs in between. The F4 key on your keyboard is the repeat last command, and that occasionally comes in handy, save you a little bit of time. Okay, next thing I want to do is show the different types of tabs. We've already seen these are left tabs, and we've seen some examples of center tabs. But I'm going to highlight my entire table here. Remember, I'm using the word table loosely. And instead of a left tab here, I think I want a center tab. And this is at 3 inches. Okay. Now there's a couple of ways I can change this. Let me show you one way here, and then I'll use a different one for this tab. One way you can change this is to remove this tab. Remember to delete it. You simply point to it. Make sure you get the little pop-up box, there it is, and pull it down, and that tab goes away. And boy, that made a mess of my table. Relax. The reason your table's a mess is there's 2 tabs here. You took out the one in the middle. I took out the one in the middle. This will correct itself as soon as I set a new tab here. I want a center tab, so I'm going to click center, and I'm going to click at 3, and there's my center tab. The book also doesn't discuss deleting tabs. Now you know how to do that. Just point to them and drag them off the ruler. Another thing you can do with tabs is fine-tune them by moving them. If you point to it until you pop up, the little pop-up comes up. Now you can drag this, get a vertical bar that shows you where it's going to go. But you also get live previews, so I can drag this and say that looks a little bit better. So you can delete tabs. You can move tabs. This one, I want to align the decimal places. This is a good example. This one's got 6 decimal places. This one's got 6. That one's got 5. This one's got 4. Some have numbers on the left, others don't. To get these to line up and look best, I think the best way to line these up would be with a decimal tab. So I'm going to change this tab. I could delete it, change this to a decimal tab, and then park that over here. That's one option. The other option is to point to any tab, and this again is not covered in the book. Point to any tab and double click. That immediately brings up this tabs window, so you don't have to go to paragraphs and then click on tabs, 2-3 clicks to get here. If you can point to a tab, double click it, it will take you to the tabs dialog box. The one I want to change is the one that's at 4.5. I want to make that a decimal tab. There's a set button, there's an OK button. There are some circumstances where you have to hit set and others where you don't. You're always safe to hit set. That's my advice, is to hit set, then hit OK. And now all my numbers are aligned down the decimal place, but now I have a problem because my exchange rate looks a little funky. Okay, my title, why is it lined up way over here? I never pressed a decimal point. Okay, so there's no decimal point to line up. Now, one thing you could do, this would be tricky, put a decimal point inside your title. Okay, that helps a little bit, and now it's lining up the decimal points, but that's not normally what I would do. Normally, I would say, you know what, for this first line only, I don't want a decimal tab here. Get rid of that. That already made it better. Right, where is it aligned? It went to the next tab stop from currency. That's the 4-inch mark. I can't trust that. I want it right aligned. Let's see how that looks. So let's find the right aligned tab. There it is. And let's just say somewhere around 5.5. No, that's going to be too much. But notice now I can move that until it looks halfway decent. So occasionally you have to mix tab types. My first line with the titles uses a right tab out here. All the rest of these use a decimal tab. So these line up halfway decent. In my notes in the examples, I do have another example where I put money in here. And money usually is displayed with 2 decimal places for every example. Right? If every example has 2 decimal places, then you can line them to the right and they'll look fine. The decimal places will line up, and the exchange rate can also be aligned to the right. Let's just do a quick example of that. I'm going to start a brand new table. So here I am down here. But notice whenever I press enter, when you create a brand new paragraph, the new paragraph automatically adopts the formatting, including the tabs, of the paragraph above it. So now my new paragraph has all of these tab markers in here. I don't want them. could delete them each individually by simply pulling them off the bar. I'm going to go to my tabs dialog box, so double-clicked, and choose clear all. And for this paragraph, because it's the only paragraph that's selected, there are now no tabs. These, click in them, and they still have their tabs. For this one, I'm going to set a right tab just out here at the end. And let's put it, you know what, I'd like it at the right margin. So I'm going to click here, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't set a tab. This is another little trick that you have to, that's nice to know. If you want to set a right tab at the right margin, you have to set it out here a little bit and then drag it over into that spot. Now over here I can type an object, so let's say I want to buy a book, and then I want to put in its price, and we'll say $20. And then I want to buy, my next page section break causing me trouble again. Turn that on. It's hiding right inside there. I think I just deleted it. Nope, it's still there someplace. Press enter, and notice I have to do it twice. It's because you can just barely see the dots there. That next page section break is causing me a little bit of grief, so you might want to be careful when you put that in. And let's say I want to buy a bike, and it's going to cost me 120, let's make it $225. Well, I just can't type today. $225 and 66 cents. Notice that because these are aligned on the right and they both have the same number of decimal places, the decimal points line up well. And they usually do. They're very, very close, even with the proportional spaced numbers. Let's put one more in here, and let's put in M&Ms. Just making stuff up as I go here, and these are going to cost $5.15. Notice that the number 1 still takes up about the same amount of room as the rest of my decimal points still line up. If I go to the beginning of this table, press enter, and I'm going to turn underlining on, Control U, and type in item, turn it off again, press tab. Now over here I can type the words product price, underline got turned back on again, and notice they align to the right, and that looks pretty good. My point here is if you're using numbers that all have the same number of decimal places, you can use right aligned or decimal aligned. It really doesn't matter. In this case, my numbers all have different numbers of decimal places, so I have two choices. I can either align the decimal points, which is what I did, or I can give them all the same number of decimal places and then use right alignment. Okay, so I changed the alignment of this one line so that it's a little bit different. One other thing I want to mention very briefly is notice if I highlight this entire table, my tabs turn gray. The reason they turn gray is that these 5 lines that I have do not have the same tab settings, and this is Microsoft Word's visual clue to you that they're not all the same. And so when you set tabs here, you still can. I could grab this tab and move it. When I set that tab and move it, all of the lines are going to have a right tab at that end. So I can move it. Right? And it makes a big difference. Now, where's my decimal tabs? I can hardly get to them. All right, so that's a clue. Just undo that. It's a clue that the lines have different tabs on them. If I want to adjust them all, right, I can try it. And take the left tab here and move it, and those are working okay. But where's the right tab? Where's the decimal tabs? It's not there because of the multiple tab settings on those different lines. Okay, a little bit more here. Let's create another example. What if I wanted to create a table of contents? And again, just for examples, I'm going to want the first part of my table of contents to be indented. So I'm going to set a left tab at a 1/2 inch. Just as an example, you could leave this at the left margin. Right, over here, wouldn't hurt anything. Most people would probably do that. Or you could change the margins of the entire table. I'm going to put a tab here just so we get a little more practice with tabs. And then I'm going to want the page number out here at, let's say, oh, first of all, notice that I already have a tab. Where'd that come from? It came from this table. When I pressed enter to move down, I've got the same tabs from this table. Well, as it turns out, I do want a right tab at 6.5, so I'm going to leave it there. creating my table of contents. So this is going to be for chapter 1. I'm going to press tab, and it's going to be on page 1. Chapter 2 is going to be on page 77. And notice because they're right aligned, they look pretty good. Chapter 3 is on page 123. And everything's lining up well, but when you get to be old like me, and I forgot, by the way, I needed these to be indented to 1/2 inch, so there's no way to do them all at once. I'm going to do each line separately. Now they're all indented. But when you get old like me and you're reading here, I want chapter 2 is on page 123. I had to go way over here, and it was hard to keep my mouse on the same line. And then when you're doing that with your eyes and you have 20 chapters, the same thing can happen. So what many people will do in their table of contents is add what are called leader characters. This can only be done with tabs. It is very difficult to do leader characters that look like this using tables. So this is one of the advantages of using tabs. Well, again, what I need to do is change one of my existing tabs. And before I do that, let's add, undo that, put a new line here. If I put it on this part right here, add a new line, then this line has the same tabs as the one above it. So sometimes it takes a little strategy there. Control U to underline, this is the chapter. Control U to not underline the tab. And here's the page number. Okay, now what I want to do is add leader characters going across here, but not on my titles. So again, I'm going to be selective. I'm going to use the selection bar and just grab these 3 examples. And I'm going to go to this tab. There, I got it. Notice you know you're pointing to it when you point to it and the right tab comes up. Okay. I'm going to double click on that. And this tab, I want to add leader characters. The trick here that many people don't recognize is you need to set the leader characters on the tab that's going to receive. When you press tab to go from here to here, when I press this tab, I want dots. Okay? Many people put it here and you don't get the effect that you want. So when you're setting tabs, you put it on the receiving tab location. So in the 6.5, I want to have leader dots. Okay, the book calls them leader dots. Most people use these dots, but there's also leader underscores and there's leader dashes. Leader characters is probably a better way to say it. So I've set that for my 6.5 inch tab. Set it, click on OK. And notice now I get the lines, and X or Word will put as many dots in here as it needs to connect from here to that tab. If I put more characters in here, the dots just disappear. If I put more characters in here, the dots adjust. So there's only a number of dots that needed in between there. So that can come in handy, and now it's less likely that when I move across the page, I'm going to lose my page number. You could also use these leader dot characters to create, fill in the blank surveys, quizzes, those kinds of things. So I want to show you an example of that. I'm going to turn the markers on again, make sure I'm not messing up my section break here. Okay, so now all of these paragraphs that I just created all have these tab settings. I don't want any of those tab settings, so I'm going to remove them. And let me try something. I'm going to click on normal and see what happens. Because a normal paragraph doesn't have tab markers. This says it already is normal. Well, a version of normal with tabs. Let's see what happens if I click on tabs. The tab markers went away. So another quick way to remove tab markers is to simply click on normal to make this a normal paragraph. Downside to using that is if you have other formatting in there, that all gets removed as well, so that may not be the optimal, but if all you have is a bunch of stuff in here to set tabs, then it's not going to cost you anything. It won't hurt to use that shortcut. Alright, I'm going to turn my markers back off again. Let's say that I'm writing a test for somebody. I'm going to say, what is the capital of Wisconsin? Question mark. And now I want a line here where the student can write their answer. Now, notice I said write their answer. This technique that I'm showing you only works well for printed tests and quizzes. In a future chapter in this intermediate Word class, you'll learn how to use placeholders so that if somebody is using Word in its electronic format and you want them to type in an answer, you can do that as well. But this is for printed tests. If we're going to take this, print it, hand it to students, this works quite well. What I want to do now is maybe put a space there, and I want to fill in across here with a line that they can write their answer on. But I'm kind of anal. I like all those lines to line up. So what I'm going to do is create a tab, and the type of tab in this case doesn't really matter because I'm not typing any text after it. I'm going to create a tab. I already have left selected. Remember, I want to put it out here in the margin, but I can't. Put it here and then drag it over. And then I'm going to double click it and select it and use the underscore leader character to create my line. Now that's much easier, particularly a line this size, that's much easier than typing a whole bunch of underscores, which is what most people would do. Now I can press enter and maybe change my line spacing. I'm not going to bother here. What is your favorite color? Tab, and I get the line. If I type more, the line length adjusts, but all the edges of the lines line up nice and neat, and that makes for a very handy way to create these kinds of questions if you're going to print. And now the last thing I want to do is just duplicate the table that's at the bottom of my instructor's notes. And notice this uses the same kind of technique. It has a bunch of tabs. And then it uses, this is a multiple choice test, it uses tabs to create these underscores so they're all exactly the same width. Again, you could easily, in this case, press underscore 5 times or 10 times or however wide you want that line to be, but you'll see this makes life just a little bit easier. So I'm going to duplicate that, and notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs set here. Okay. This first tab is just a regular left tab. Then there's a tab that allows me to press the tab key to create this underscore. Then there's a tab that makes all these city name line up. And there's a tab that makes all the numbers line up. And then there's a tab that makes all the team names lined up. Now this is pretty lame because the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, everybody lines up. You should mix those up, obviously, in a quiz. But the point is not that it's a valid quiz. The point is how do we type this to make life a little easier. Okay, so let's create that 5 tabs. I can go to the end of this one, and I'm going to use the normal button to remove all my tabs. The first tab is where the beginning of the underscore is supposed to start, so I'm going to put that here. And then the second tab is where the underscore, the blank line ends. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to immediately double click that and set. Make sure I select it. Notice the 1/2 is selected, not the 1. The 1 is selected, set the underscore. And now when I move tab from here to there, I should get an underscore. So tab, tab, there's my underscore. Now I want to set another tab for the team name. I want the team names aligned to the left. Notice I'm using a lot of left tabs. And I want that fairly close. That was too close. Let's try it again. What happened to my underscore? I think I just deleted that. I think I deleted it. Yep. That was a mistake. I dragged one tab on top of the other. Press tab, and this is where my team name goes, Green Bay. Okay. And now, way far away, I want another tab for the numbers. Again, a left tab. Now, this might not be bad. I'm going to change this to a decimal tab, because if I have 10 teams, I want the 10 to line up on the right. So I'm going to make this a decimal tab. And we'll put it out here at, say, let's try it at 5. You can always move it. So this is a decimal tab. Tab, 1 point. Now I have to make sure that I always type the decimal point, otherwise I'm going to have issues. And then finally I need one more tab, and this one needs to be left aligned. So I'm going to go back to my left aligned tab for my team name. Let's put that right around there. Tab, and that's for the Packers. Or if I want to mix them up a little bit, the Lions. So now I've got my first paragraph all set up with tabs here, here, here. I changed things a little bit, put a decimal tab there. Okay. Could have been a right tab, as you'll see, and a left tab here. Now when I press enter, I press tab, tab, tab. That gives me my underscore ready for the next team. That's Chicago, tab. Notice the decimal point. And this is also a little weird. Watch what happens when I type this number. There's my decimal point. I didn't want it that way, but watch when I type numbers. They're going the other direction. It's waiting for me to type a decimal point so it can line it up with the one up above. Same thing happens when you have right aligned words. They type to the left so that the right edge is always lined up. That's normal. 2 point. And here we'll put in the Colts. Now another line, tab, tab, tab. And this will be for Minnesota. Tab. 3 point. Packers. Just kind of mixing up my quiz here. I'm just pressing tab to move those over. And they look a lot. When I turn my markers on, there's one tab for each one of these. And if you look back at the notes, 1, 2, 3 tabs. 1, 2, 3 tabs. Right? Then there's one tab to get the rest of them in there. But everybody lines up nice and neat. The other thing I need is Indianapolis. Indianapolis. Oh, come on. One, two, three. And finally, what's left here? Probably Detroit. And the team that's left, let's pretend it's team 10. Notice how the 10s line up. And again, I'm going to turn these markers off. If you don't need them, then I turn them off. They make me crazy. And then Vikings is the last team. But now you can see how you can quickly make these kinds of quizzes. Again, these quizzes are great for printing. But if this is something that you want the user to type in here, that's not so easy. Okay, they can type their answer in there, but notice that the line keeps moving, and that kind of bothers people. Most people would like to have that line underneath. Tables kind of make that happen, but then the tables don't have these variable sized lines, and they all have to be the same size. You have to experiment with things, and in future units you'll learn how to put placeholder text in here where the user can click and fill in the placeholder, and then you lock the document so they can't change anything else. But anyways, I'm going to get too sidetracked here. These are great for printed quizzes and tests and surveys and those kinds of things. So that's the down and dirty, a little bit more on tabs, and the book covers a lot more, but what you'll need. And again, let's adjust here. Here's my header for my second page. What I really want is my right tab to be in the landscape page in the right margin. So it looks good. I want this centered. This is 9, so the center position is 4.5 inches. And so being able to adjust tabs and know how to simply drag them is also very convenient if you have headers with left, center, and right aligned text, and you want to adjust those on different pages, because when you add a landscaped page, it doesn't adjust them. Did it do them both? It sure did. Okay, move them both, because it moved them on both pages. So now I need to undo that. This wasn't part of my plan here, but I need to undo that. And then say that this header is not the same as previous. To take off the same as previous, this was unit 3 or 2, I forget which one in beginning word. You click the link to previous button, and now that's gone. This page is no longer connected to this section is no longer connected to the first section, so when I move this to 4.5, and move this one to 9, missed. I lost it. Let's undo that. It doesn't affect the first page anymore. I had to disconnect them. But that's another reason to use tabs. The tabs are already set, but in the second page, because it's landscape, they're just in the wrong spot. So I adjusted it. All right, that's probably the longest recording I've ever done, but we covered tabs thoroughly. Hopefully that'll help you accomplish the assignments as well.